Hello and welcome to the Creativesinfocus podcast, the podcast where we share real conversations with creatives and founders who are passionate about impact and change. I am Victoria Bola Okerinde, your host. On this podcast, we discuss the journey to excellence and creating for impact. This is episode 28. Can you believe it? I mean, we are in the last month of 2020 and what a year it has been. We will definitely not forget this year. I mean, it's going to come up in so many future conversations. But I would like to ask you a question. What have you learned from this year, from the year 2020? I have been doing a lot of reflecting, and although it has been a difficult year, I have experienced a lot of personal growth. I hope you're all keeping well. Thank you for sticking to this podcast for a whole year. I appreciate your support. This week, I had the pleasure to speak to Umutoni Thuku-Benzinge. She is a London-based East African trailblazer and an entrepreneur. She founded the brand Kaleidoscope Beauty with a vision to create and sustain social impact in sub-Saharan Africa. Within 8 months of launching the brand Kaleidoscope Beauty, they were featured in the magazine Forbes and BBC Africa. I had a great time speaking to Umutoni. I mean, her heart for people shines through, and her unique vision for empowering artisans from disadvantaged backgrounds is truly inspiring. So what do we speak about on this episode? On this episode, we talk about growing a sustainable and ethical brand. We talk about building relationships with artisans and creating positive impact and empowerment through business. I'm truly inspired by Umutoni, and I'm sure you will after listening to this episode. So let's get straight into this episode. Introducing Umutoni Thuku-Benzinge. Hi, Umutoni.
Hello, Victoria. How are you doing?
I am doing fantastic. It's so amazing to have you on the Creativesinfocus podcast. I mean, I have read so much about you and your brand, Kaleidoscope Beauty, and you guys are doing amazing things, both in the UK and abroad as well.
Thank you. It's an absolute honor to be on the podcast today.
So I'm sure a few people have heard of you because you've definitely been widely recognized in the media. You've been on Forbes, you've been on different platforms. However, can you introduce yourself and your brand to us? Let us know sort of like a little bit about your journey, how you got to starting Kaleidoscope Beauty.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Umutoni Thuku-Benzinge. I am founder of Kaleidoscope Beauty, which is a brand that's all about showcasing the beauty of Africa through contemporary, handcrafted statement jewelry pieces. And what's unique about the brand is the mission, which is kind of central to everything that we do. So we have a big focus on empowering the disenfranchised. And how we do this is all of our pieces are handmade in Kenya, which is originally where I'm from. I'm both Kenyan and Rwandese, by artisans who are from disadvantaged communities. So largely from slums, so young men, young women who've been able to kind of develop skills that enable them to create a sustainable source of income for themselves and their families and their communities. So it really has been a beautiful journey just to kind of see the process. I mean, even for me, I'd say that the business opened me up to life in the slums a lot more. I'd never been to a slum prior to launching Kaleidoscope Beauty. I hadn't physically stepped foot in one. I've now been to 2 big ones in Kenya. And with regards to the business itself, so I launched in December 2018, kind of like as a bit of a side hustle. So I did have a 9-to-5 at the time. I was working full-time within the IT industry and would kind of do Kaleidoscope Beauty mornings, evenings, weekends, like just try and make the most of those 24 hours. And it was really well received. So I think within 8 months, I had an article in Forbes magazine. Well, yeah, Forbes online. Yes, that was big. That was a very big deal for me. And actually just gave me like that additional validation, like, oh, okay, like I had a plan, but it's good to see that it's being received the way that I'd intended. And I think that just gave me, that boost to be like, okay, I can take this full time. And build the brand. And fast forward to 2020, I'm now doing it full time. So I've left the 9-to-5, it left in the middle of pandemic.
Wow. I mean, brave move there. But yeah, I know that quite a few individuals have actually done that. Like during the pandemic, they've just decided, you know what, this is just a time to go full time. Amazing. I mean, in terms of sort of going full time and sort of you following your dream to build Kaleidoscope Beauty, what actually ignited your passion for change? Because you mentioned that sort of you've been working with a number of individuals in Kenya who may be from disadvantaged backgrounds, but what actually ignited your passion? How did you even discover, you know, these individuals work in Kenya, and how did you start working with them?
So I feel like there's various different pieces that make up the story for me. So with regards to how I started, or my interest in jewelry. So actually when I was in my teen years, 15, 16, I used to go to Kenya every summer. It's just something my mum would send myself and my sister for the summer, just go and be with family, cousins, aunties, uncles. And when I'd come back, I'd kind of aim to get a few gifts for friends, family. And what I found is with time, I got requests for more things. And this was typically in the form of jewelry. So I'd go to the Maasai market, pick a few items. And yeah, as time went on, there was a bit more demand and people said, hey, would you get me this? Would you get me that? And it got to a place where I had to just be very honest and say, hey, like my pocket money does not extend that far. So would you be interested in buying a few pieces? And the response was yes. So went with one of my favorite aunties to the Maasai market, Auntie Angie, got lots of pieces, came back to London, sold a few, and I'm like, wow, okay, this is amazing. And I remember there was even a fair at church, there was a fair at church, and I sold my jewelry. I think my mom had like a book on Kenyan history, and we laid like koi and tried to make it like as African as possible. And I remember I made like £100 profit on the day. So at 15 and 16, I was just like, whoa, you know, especially because it was something I kind of stumbled into. Like I didn't have a business plan. I didn't have any, like, there was no website or anything, you know, kind of official. But that was a really good experience. Having said that, when I was 15, 16, I really was not kind of focused on starting my own business. So it was nice, had a nice run, and I continued like just life, right? So I didn't pursue the business angle. But what I found is, like, kind of fast forward to when Black Panther was launched, is I remember watching the movie and just being in awe of everything, right?
Yeah.
Of the images that were being portrayed. But what I found really striking were the costumes and the accessories that were used, because I was like, wow, this is very similar to the kind of stuff I was selling. Like, I could see the influence from different African cultures in the costumes. And this is something that, it's a Hollywood film, right? It broke records and blockbusters and that kind of stuff. And I think that kind of reignited the whole, the vision for me to relaunch the jewelry brand, and just really realize that, number one, well, we know just due to pop culture and stuff that this is really a time, like, African music, fashion has always, I think it's always been weaved into the forefront of fashion, but it hasn't always necessarily been something that has been led by us for the culture,
by African designers,
by African designers. So although I would always go into shops and see African influence, there wasn't necessarily, the continent wasn't necessarily been given its due credit.
That's right.
So yeah, that kind of experience, coupled with the fact that I used to, I support a young girl through school in Kenya. So again, I think 2016, I reached out to my grandma and just said, hey, Shosho's grandma. I really want to support a young girl through school. I didn't know what to expect in terms of finances, but I just knew that it was something that I was really passionate about. But I didn't want to go through a traditional kind of charity, for the simple fact that I wanted, number one, to be able to have a relationship with this girl. Like, I wanted to be able to meet her and actually have, develop a relationship per se, because I think giving money is amazing, but I think what raises a child is kind of like the love and appreciation. Like, as humans, we want to be seen, right? We want to be seen, we want to be heard. And I didn't want to just be portrayed as this girl that's across the pond that just has a lot of money, which is how I think I could have been portrayed, you know, had I not been able to develop a relationship with a young girl that I do support. But what I found is, I think also with the whole model of charity, sometimes it builds like a giver and depender kind of model. So when it came to launching the business, I've always had I have a heart for people. I think my mum's she's a big influence to me as well. And just so all of those kind of experiences coupled together just made me realize that, number one, yes, I want to bring the business. This is Africa's time, just generally. I should be a part of that change. And number two, I really want it to have an element of impact, but one that does not create dependency per se. So because like Africa has a very large young population, right? And all of these young people have great ideas, have dreams, are hardworking, and we're all dreaming. So there's no reason why me supporting like a young artisan, they're making money, they're growing and developing, I'm able to do the same, and we're all growing together. I think that's a lot more like impactful and number two, sustainable. Like, yes, at the moment, right, I'm a single woman, I don't have kids, I don't have family, but I know as time does go by, that will be something that's gonna happen in the future. And I don't want that period to come to be like, oh guys, okay, I can't help you anymore. So I just wanted it to be a bit more of a sustainable model.
Amazing. So inspiring to just hear like your journey. And I see a lot of influence. You mentioned your family, you mentioned sort of the church, you also mentioned sort of like your drive to actually impact people personally and have that personal touch develop in the relationship. And I think it's so inspiring for someone so young to really be looking ahead and actually infusing all those values into your business. I think it's so inspiring. Amazing.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So you mentioned obviously building your business in Africa and also, in the UK as well. Can you give us a little bit of insight into setting up a business that functions in Africa as well as in the UK? So in multiple locations. Yeah. Like what is your experience starting up a business or working with artisans or manufacturers in another continent?
It's been an interesting experience. I definitely say it's not something I kind of had any real idea of what it would look like at the beginning, but I guess when you're an entrepreneur, you're a solutionist, right? So I don't know how to do this, but I will figure it out, kind of thing. And it just also helped that that I am from Kenya and I go to Kenya every year anyways. So what it meant is that while I was out in Kenya, just being really intentional about trying to build those relationships, whether it was with artisans, seeing many different people. I have had some big challenges with that as well sometimes, which we can talk about a bit later. But I mean, it's very fulfilling. I think it's very fulfilling to know that you're working with people in these communities and that you're building something and that you can see an impact, and also just very inspiring to see the kind of products that are created. I actually just came back from Kenya on Tuesday morning, so I'm in the middle of quarantining, but the trip was very inspiring. I was out there for 2 months, and the purpose was literally to kind of grow my team of artisans out there, just to get a bit more of an understanding as to what was happening, addressing some of the challenges, but also able to see family and friends, and been able to work with some really good people who are going to help keep things running on the ground while I'm here as well. So there's been lots of use of like WhatsApp and stuff to communicate with my artisans, and that's kind of just been key to kind of keep communication going even while I'm here.
Fantastic, thank you. I mean, I think I picked something, developing a relationship, actually being on ground. You're on ground for about 2 months or more in the year, actually developing those relationships, working with the artisans. I think is so important. Especially if you're working in another location and with individuals from a different continent. So it's just something, hopefully someone can learn from this. I'm sure a number of people who are either African or from, a different background looking to work with artisans or with manufacturers in a different continent will learn from your experience and what you're currently doing just now. So you've mentioned your experiences starting up a business and running a business in Africa and in the UK. And this is something that not everyone has the opportunity to do. How has this experience helped you as a business owner to navigate this pandemic?
Good question. And I mean, the pandemic has really been a game changer, I think, globally and for everybody individually. It's definitely posed a number of different challenges. But I think the key thing that we have to try and take away from the pandemic is just adaptability. So like I mentioned a bit earlier, I think when you're an entrepreneur, and actually generally speaking, I just want our community, the culture, to be able to adapt. Things change and we adapt with the times, because that's the only way we're gonna kind of keep up and stay ahead of the curve and stuff like that. So how has being a business owner helped me? That's a good question. Well, it's really forced me to think about solutions. It really has forced me to address, because I mentioned how with Kaleidoscope Beauty, I wanted it to be a business that's all about impact. And the middle of a pandemic, obviously the need grows, especially in the communities that I was working with. So I really had to ask myself that question, like, okay, you say you're about philanthropy, impact in these communities. Right now, the need is bigger now than ever. So what am I going to do about it? So it's really made me come face to face with a lot of those questions. And I'd say quite early on. So when I launched, Kaleidoscope Beauty was just aimed at women. Target market was women. But throughout the course of 2019, I had a number of different men reach out and say, hey, we'd really love a few pieces. We'd really love a few pieces. We'd really love a few pieces. And I thought, okay, let me listen. Let me test this out. Let's see. Even though I was like, okay, the website, I feel like it's very feminine. The name Kaleidoscope Beauty, would a guy go shop there? Like I had all these kind of questions, but I was like, okay, let me test it out. So I was actually in Kenya over Christmas as well. So for like a month in and out. And that's when I got my first item, like men's item, literally to test the market. So I had a collection that was launching, I think, in March. And then following that, I had these rings lined up. So the Umoja men rings, which were like the brass rings with the African continent on it. However, pandemic hit. And I was like, man, okay, so I was supposed to launch these. People are dying. Like, isn't that very, like, I really had to ask myself some questions like, do I stop selling? Like, am I being insensitive by launching a product? And that's when I asked myself that question, like, okay, right now the need is higher than it ever has been. What am I doing about it if I say that the business is all about helping communities? So I launched the Umoja campaign, which is where I communicated with my artisans and just said, hey, I'd love to help a little bit more. Like, what are the needs in the slum? And I was a bit scared to even ask that question because the needs in a slum on any given day are great. So in the middle of a pandemic, I was really like, oof. And so it took me a time, maybe a week or so to even ask the question, but had the conversations, and just food was a big need. And for the simple fact that I think in Africa, but also in these communities, people need to physically work to get money. There is no luxury of working from home, like Wi-Fi on your laptop or, things like that. So it was because there's people like street hawkers, so they'll sell food, veg, items like in the midst of traffic, on the side of the road. And when Kenya, the whole country or everyone's been kind of told to stay in their houses, to social distance, to avoid public spaces, that was a threat to their livelihood. So came up with a Umoja campaign where 50% of the rings basically were going towards providing families with a month's supply of food in the form of rice, green grams, oil, sugar, beans, maize, flour, literally some of just the essentials to keep them going. But what really shocked me was just what that kind of meant, you know? So it was just over 30 something pounds to feed a family for a month. I was like, wow, that's like nearly £1 a day to feed a family for a month. So we ran that campaign. It was a success. We sold out. And I put together a video summarizing the stories. But what that showed me was, okay, guys are still buying stuff. There is a genuine interest. And I think also just understanding that although the brand has great aesthetics and things like that, I think the thing that really connects with people is the stories, is the fact that we are working with these communities. So yeah, so the pandemic has just really made me come face to face with what I kind of set out to do and ask myself some very tough questions. Now leaving the 9 to 5, definitely a period of adjusting because I studied economics, I was working in IT, I had quite a good job. So, but I just felt like there was more that could be done. So I kind of took the opportunity to take a pay pack. But again, very, very scary. I mean, there's a lot of emotions kind of associated with it. It was very liberating at first. I was like, wow, my own boss. But when the glamorous glamorous stuff goes to the side, it's like, okay, I also got my own property towards the end of last year. So I knew that I needed a job to get a mortgage. Yeah. But after you've got it, like, I was like, wow, okay, I've got it. I can leave now. Literally. Yeah. So, but yes, it has been a challenging time, and just, trying to find solutions, trying to see, now that I've left, my biggest question is, how do I scale the business? How do I take this to the next level? How do we impact more families, more communities, and just grow the brand? So I don't know if I've answered your question, but I think
yes, you have. Yes, you have. And you've actually kind of brought me to another question that I was going to ask. But, let's talk a little bit about, making a difference with your brand, because you've highlighted and you told us sort of how you're doing that. And I just wanted to kind of bring it down and ask, in terms of the actual making of your jewelry, like, how do you design, like, what goes into the design process? You mentioned you source your materials from various markets, but yeah, just let us into the design process of your jewelry, and what inspires some of the pieces that you personally love.
Yeah, sure. So initially, say I meet a new designer, and at first I just want to see what they have, just so I can see their level of creativity, what their finish is like, quality control. And then there's typically like a couple of ideas in my mind that I really want to execute. And so I'll put something together and say, okay, this is what I'm trying to achieve. How achievable is it? And so it can go from literally like a drawing on my phone, which isn't very advanced, to kind of just sharing the pictures, sharing the idea, and creating as we go. Sometimes it is like, okay, send me progress pictures as you go with this particular item. So typically our jewelry is made from brass. We have some brass pieces, there are some beaded pieces, and then there are some that kind of incorporate leather as well. So a really good example is a belt bag that I designed last year in time for summer. So it was ahead of festival season. Fanny packs were a big thing. I think I'd gone to Coachella the previous year. So I was like, do you know what? I think this would be a great idea, something that we can, like, let's really push the boundaries a little bit, because I'd I'd figured out the business. I'd figured out the website. I was like, okay, let me push a little bit more. So the design process literally is just fusing kind of contemporary, African designs with, and then putting a contemporary spin on them. So fanny packs were a big thing at the time. If you go to Kenya, there's a lot of Maasai belts that are sold in markets. So I was like, if we use the Maasai belt, which is where it's like a leather belt with beading on there, and then have add the bag, like a leather bag, put beading on there just to make it unique and colorful, still stylish, very functional, then let's bring that together. That's an idea of what it's like. I wish I could even, I wish I had the picture to hand, but it was
I'd
very,
love to
very
see
basic.
it.
It was very basic. It was literally like me drawing on my screen with my finger, like on my iPhone. Yeah, so it's a combination of things, or sometimes it's seeing an existing design and then saying, okay, let's tweak this, let's change that, let's change the shape of this, the size of that, the material on this, and kind of going from there. So the idea is to definitely have more like bespoke items going forward. As the brand continues to grow.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. I mean, it's always so exciting to hear like everyone's process in terms of designing and moving to manufacturing and stuff. So thank you. So what advice do you have for creating a sustainable and ethical brand? You've mentioned a lot about, storytelling, telling the stories of the artisans you work with. And I've seen your mission video actually, and kind of give me a little bit of insight into some of the ethos behind your brand. But do you have any other advice for anyone who's listening to this who would like to create a sustainable and an ethical brand?
Yeah. So in terms of creating a sustainable and ethical brand, I think just how society is moving at the moment, it is definitely something that is very relevant. There are a few statistics that kind of say, people are more concerned with where their items are, where their products are made, who they're made by, where material is sourced. And I think there's something here. So findings from research show that 2 in 5 consumers want more information on which jewelry is ethically sourced, while 42% also want retailers to sell more ethically sourced products. So even from a business perspective, you're positioning yourself quite well if your brand is kind of addressing those. And in terms of just being ethical, sustainable, it's trying to, obviously the use of plastic, ensure that it really isn't a thing, trying to work with communities, make sure people are being paid what they should be paid, make sure you know what like minimum wages and things like that, but and then making sure that it is built into the entire chain, right? So not just the product, your delivery, your like throughout the entire chain. So even for me, it's something that I am trying to increase going forward. But yeah, I think it's just it makes sense. Like being sustainable makes sense.
Yeah, it's
for lack of better terms.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely needed in this time. I mean, it's the way forward. So as a entrepreneur, as a creative, I think it's really important to build that in your brand's image, in your brand's ethos, in your brand's mission, to be sustainable and ethical. And there are various ways for you to do that. And I know for some people, especially starting out, it may seem a little bit more expensive to pick, more sustainable packaging and all that. But I think you just work bit by bit. And as you grow, you'll be able to fulfill that mission of being fully sustainable and ethical. But thank you so much for giving us a little bit of insight into how you've managed to do that, to be sustainable and an ethical brand. You actually mentioned a little bit about sort of how you're navigating this uncertain time in terms of the pandemic and your plans to actually scale, to grow your business. Can you let us know or give us any advice in terms of any resources that might help to grow a business in this time, or just any time, to be honest with you?
Great question. Probably one I'm still trying to figure out myself. But I mean, I guess what makes a brand kind of stand out is the story, like your narrative. I think that's what's unique for everybody. So yes, there are other jewelry brands out there. I'm sure there are other jewelry brands that make their stuff in Kenya. But what makes Kaleidoscope Beauty unique is our story. So be very vocal about that, and find a way to tell it in an engaging, exciting way. Like even if I example of having the men's rings, even though the branding I would say hasn't been very masculine, the name maybe wasn't that masculine, what I found is that people connected with a mission. So they were there regardless of whether there was pink on the page or, you know, it was really vibrant, feminine imagery. And I think that will just keep us going, because definitely in the future, I would love to be able to tailor the brand to make sure it is a lot more inclusive for everyone. But what will keep people there in the interim is the fact that they connect with a story, with a mission, with the communities. And then in terms of scaling, I guess just really understanding your supply chain, like understand what it would take. So from designing an item, who makes it, what's the turnaround time, what's their capacity, is there consistency, is there lack of consistency? If there is a lack, how do you improve on that? So just really trying to make sure that you've answered those questions before they're exposed. So for me, I guess, well, there's a big kind of push for Black-owned businesses at the moment, globally. It's also about making sure that you're prepared for that. So with me, I'll give you an example. Once I left the 9 to 5, and I was like, I'm doing this full time, started having some really good conversations. But then as I placed some of my orders, I started to see like a lack of consistency in some of the finishes, and I had to return things. And that really made me think like, oh, if this was a big order for insert store name here, that would be a disaster. Like that would actually really just ruin credibility, or, you know, it would affect finances and things like that. So it's just about really trying to address those questions in advance, I guess, as well as possible. Also starting to build a team. So that is, again, something I'm in the process of doing, because it's not an easy journey at all.
On your own, it's hard. It's hard being an entrepreneur, and especially in the beginning. I mean, you're 2 years in, but like doing everything on your own is difficult. It's
challenging. But exciting at the same time if you're doing something that you love. But then also being able to have reports. So understanding your customers, who are they, where are they, what's their age, how do they navigate through the website, where can you make improvements. So I'm blessed that I've had a number of different people who've been able to pour in and let me know, okay, this is great, this isn't so good, let's change this, let's tweak that. So and then obviously there's the question of financing. Are a big part of scaling. So trying to really understand what that would look like, if it is a marketing budget that you need, whether it's paying staff that you're going to need going forward. And these are the kind of questions that I am asking myself at the moment, just as I kind of prepare for that. I mean, there's a lot of resources out there, but it really is just trying to do the work, have a good network, like have friends who are also entrepreneurs. I found that to be extremely helpful, because there have been days where I've been so down or crying, and then I'll reach out to a friend like, this is what I'm like stressed about, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's normal, don't worry, this is what you need to do. And you're like, oh, okay, it's not too bad. But especially in the middle of a pandemic where, you know, everyone's been encouraged to stay at home, potential lockdown is coming, you can be alone with your thoughts. So in terms of scaling, I think it's just kind of understanding, what does the market want, what does it need, and addressing some of those questions. Understand your finances, your supply chain, your team. Social media is a big thing, something I'm again need to work on a bit more. Have those good partnerships, from a personal network perspective, also with influencers, if that's something that your brand uses, and kind of go from there.
Wow, fantastic. Thank you so much. I mean, there's so many things that you've mentioned in it. A lot of it is actually looking at different aspects of your business, of your brand, and seeing how you can improve on them. So you mentioned finances, you mentioned marketing, you mentioned obviously your understanding who your customers are and how you can serve them better. You mentioned also the networking side of things, and ensuring that you as an entrepreneur, you have people who can support you, you know, especially during this time. Is quite an interesting, difficult time for just anyone. Talk less of you being an entrepreneur and you know, putting your whole passion into something that you're building. It's very important to have people who inspire and build you up as well. Amazing. In terms of your business, what impact would you like to continue to make as an individual and as a business?
I would love to have like a solid team. I'd love to have like my own workplace. I'd love to be able to teach more and more artisans like, how to create stuff. And also because I think while I was in Kenya, say over these past 2 months, there's one webinar that I was a part of, and had a number of artisans on the call, not just jewelry, but all sorts of various different creative communities, endeavors. And the biggest question for them, or their biggest challenge, was like reaching the international markets. So I really want it to be, in terms of impact, being able to partner with people who have these needs where we're helping each other, so that whole thing of sustainability, like you have a need, I have a need, I may be able to reach some of these international markets, you are able to create some of this jewelry, like let's work together. And also just making sure that model of dependability isn't there. Like we're all young, you have a side hustle, like you've got your own podcast. And so it's also just coming out of this whole, when I was in the 9 to 5, one thing I struggled with was, I was like, am I supposed to tell people I have a side hustle? Am I not? I know.
Struggle with that.
Honestly,
I would say don't tell people, unless that there are people who, what is your take on that? And what is your experience in that?
My experience, let me tell you my experience. No, I'm joking. So there are people that were quite like very supportive and happy for me, but then it did raise a number of eyebrows, I'd say, in the business that I was in, which was quite unfortunate. I did feel, I was like, wow, well, also, what have I done? Why is everyone kind of, I did feel like there were a few people who weren't too pleased with what I was doing, or just really questioned, oh, is Umutoni really working? Oh, is Umutoni really this? So it is challenging, but so I try to keep it as quiet as I could. Like one of my best friends was a colleague of mine. So I would tell her everything, like literally as emails came in, I was like, this is happening. And she was also an entrepreneur, so she could relate from that perspective. Once the Forbes article was out, which was quite early on, I was like, okay, this one, I'm not sure I can kind of keep this away from everyone. Like, I would rather bring it up as opposed to somebody come try and bring it up at work and be a bit manipulative with the situation. But as I said, like it did pose a few questions where some people will kind of, question whether you're really working, how hard you're working, what you're working on. But it's a very difficult one to navigate. But I think if you're clear in your head as to what your plan is, then it can keep you kind of focused and centered. And I knew that I didn't want to be in the 9 to 5 for too long. Like there were days I was like, I'm just trying to get my mortgage, So yeah, I don't think there is a very straightforward way of answering that question. Unfortunately, it depends on the individual that you're with. There's some people who may be jealous of what you're doing, or maybe jealous of the recognition that you're receiving, or may question certain aspects of your life, or so it's a very delicate one. And so generally speaking, it's easier if you don't, I think. Sometimes though, you can find that you will receive support. I've heard of people who've actually even received financial support or investors from their place of work. So amazing, honestly, it really does depends on the individuals. So it's a very difficult one. I don't think there's a blanket answer for that. What's your experience been?
So my experience has been quite similar to yours. So because I work full time, I work 9 to 5. And I also work at local authority level as well. So I have to be quite careful in terms of ensuring that I don't have anything that will impact my job or like the image of the local authority. But I find that it's best for me to, as I'm growing as a brand, as a small business owner, it's best for me to just keep things as low key as possible, because it's a side hustle. My main focus is my job, my 9 to 5. So when I'm at my work, I just try to ensure that not a lot of people know what I'm doing in terms of my business or in terms of the podcast. But like you said, I mean, if you're doing amazing, or if you're doing something that's unique, something that's novel, people will see, people will recognize, people will find out. So I don't know. I think it's just when it's the right time, you will know, if that makes sense. When is the right time, you know how to kind of approach and tell people what's going on. But when you're building, I think it's best to just keep things to yourself. And then, for instance, with the Forbes article, that's something that you couldn't hide. And like you said, you just have to say. But if they don't really need to know, unless it's in the contract that, you can't be doing this and this and that, you need to tell them, you need to disclose them. But
it's a sensitive one. My mom was also like, you have to shine, don't dim your light, which is also true. Don't dim your light. And that's why with the Forbes one, I was like, okay, this is something I'm so excited about. I should be super proud of. I'm just going to share it, because otherwise, just
amazing. I mean, I think it really just depends really on the individual and the industry that you're in, because some industries won't allow you to, have other side hustles or whatever. So what are you looking forward to in terms of the rest of the year, personally, and for Kaleidoscope Beauty?
The rest of the year, and what a year it has been.
Yes.
What am I looking forward to in the rest of the year? Do you know what? Just gaining more clarity. Like, as I said, this whole journey for me of pursuing the business full time is new, like very new. And I think I even had to have a bit of a mental shift, because I've always seen myself as something that was good with maths and economics and IT. And so very traditional kind of professional paths. Whereas now with being a business owner, I am seeing myself as a bit more of a creative. So just trying to really understand, what does that mean for me? What areas have I not explored in the past, or have I kind of closed myself off to, that I should really be taking advantage of? So just gaining clarity of my journey, making the most of opportunities, continuing to connect with people, grow sales, share the brand story, trying to find the most effective way of doing that. And with Kaleidoscope Beauty, the biggest thing I kind of look forward to is being able to impact more lives. So on this previous trip that I just came from, I mentioned that our pieces are made in a slum. So previously it was in Babandogo, which is a slum that's on the fringes of Nairobi. I've just connected with some new artisans. So the new collection is going to be made in another slum called Kibera. So Kibera is actually the biggest urban slum on the African continent, which for me blew my mind after that. I was like, whoa, like, okay, that's big. And in terms of like the contrast, it was just, how do the two slums compare? I'd say Kibera was like a lot more fast paced. Like the hustle was real. It was evident. You could feel it. Like it wasn't, not that I'd stroll through Babondogo per se, but it definitely felt like you have to be here, fully present. There's a lot of things going on and you need to be moving. So so what I look forward to is just being able to, make more of an impact, work with more artisans, increase sales, share the story of the communities, and then also being able to branch out into other things. And personally, I feel like I answered the personally one in the first part. So just figuring this journey out, just kind of gaining more clarity, facing more fears and challenges, but hopefully addressing them as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And do you have any final piece of advice for our listeners, any young entrepreneurs who are listening just now?
Yeah, sure. So when it comes to entrepreneurship, I think one quote that I love is start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. Like, I think the idea, especially when we have our dreams and our visions, and they're big and they're scary. When you're at the very start of that, it can seem quite intimidating. And you're like, oh, maybe I don't have enough money, or I don't have enough time, or I don't have enough, I don't know, followers or customers or ideas. But I think it's just really to start making progress. You'll be surprised by what you do have, and, the resources that you do have available to yourself, and the ones that will just kind of expose themselves, so I think something to bear in mind is just that willingness to go. I mean, definitely do your market research, definitely be quite realistic with a few of those things, but build a network and give it a try. Like, I think we're young, there's nothing wrong with failing. I think we should just fail forward, learn something from that. I've had to come face to face with the idea of that, because I was like, oh my gosh, what if I fail? If you fail, and you pick back up and you keep going. Like, you've made progress, you've gained some sort of clarity.
Thank you so much. Amazing insight you've given, and knowledge, and just hearing from your personal experience is so inspiring. And in terms of the work and the impact that you want to continue to make through your business, and just through yourself as a creative and entrepreneur. So how can our listeners connect with you?
Yeah, so personally, my social media handles are at Blessed Umu. So that is both on Twitter and Instagram. For Kaleidoscope Beauty, the Instagram is at Kaleidoscope Beauty Ltd. The Twitter is at Kaleidoscope BE2. And if you want to send an email to info@, kaleidoscopebeauty.co.uk.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Umutoni. I mean, it's been such an amazing conversation with you, just hearing about your passion for impact, your passion for change through your brand is so amazing. Can't wait to hear amazing things that you will continue to do, and for the collections that are coming. Thank you so much. And I do wish you a fantastic day.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your platform, sharing the story, and just keep doing what you're doing as well.
Thank you for listening to this episode and for sticking with Creatives in Focus over this past year. This will be our last guest interview for 2020. What a year it has been. I mean, I deserve some time to relax and celebrate, and I know you do as well. I wish you a safe and joyful time in this holiday season. And I just must say that your support has been incredible. You can also continue to support us by subscribing, sharing, and liking our posts on social media, or leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. As always, you can connect with us through our socials on Instagram at Creatives in Focus, on Twitter at Creatives in Focus. If you have suggestions for topics or guests to invite, please email us at creativesinfocus@gmail.com. See you in a bigger and brighter 2021. Until next time, influence change and create for impact.